In a bustling city filled with skyscrapers, busy streets, and the constant hum of life, 12-year-old Marcus Williams found himself adjusting to yet another new beginning. His mother, Dr. Evelyn Williams, had recently moved them to this vibrant but overwhelming neighborhood for a fresh start. Marcus was shy by nature, often preferring books over conversations and quiet corners over crowded places. The move left him feeling like an outsider once again, struggling to fit into his new surroundings. Evelyn, on the other hand, was no stranger to challenges. A highly accomplished entrepreneur, she had built her career from scratch, overcoming countless hurdles along the way. Recently, she had achieved something remarkable. She became the owner of one of the largest banks in the region. Despite her success, Evelyn chose to keep this fact private, especially from her son. She wanted Marcus to grow up without relying on privilege or status, hoping he would learn the value of hard work and resilience. One sunny afternoon, as Marcus sat at the dining table flipping through a comic book, Evelyn handed him a birthday check from his grandmother. "Why don't you take this to the bank and deposit it yourself?" she suggested warmly. "It'll be good practice for handling money." At first, Marcus hesitated. He had never been inside a bank before, let alone handled financial transactions. But seeing the encouraging smile on his mother's face, he nodded reluctantly and agreed to give it a try. The walk to the bank felt longer than expected. With each step closer to the towering glass building, Marcus grew more nervous. The bank loomed ahead, its shiny exterior reflecting the sunlight, almost intimidating in its grandeur. As he pushed open the heavy glass doors, a wave of cool air greeted him, accompanied by the faint scent of polished wood and leather chairs. The lobby was vast, with high ceilings and gleaming marble floors that echoed every footstep. People bustled about, some chatting animatedly while others stood patiently in line waiting for their turn at the counters. Marcus clutched the check tightly in his hand, feeling the paper crinkle slightly under his grip. He approached the line, unsure of what to expect. Around him, adults seemed confident and composed, moving with purpose. For a moment, he wondered if he belonged there, a small boy surrounded by grown-ups conducting serious business. When it was finally his turn, he stepped forward hesitantly, his heart pounding like a drum. Behind the counter sat Linda Harper, a middle-aged woman with sharp features and an even sharper tone. Known among colleagues for her impatience, Linda rarely hid her frustration when dealing with customers who didn't meet her standards. As Marcus placed the check on the counter, his voice faltered when explaining why he was there. I want to deposit this," he stammered, his cheeks flushing red. Linda glanced down at the slip of paper, then back at Marcus. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and her eyes narrowed slightly. Without missing a beat, she leaned forward, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Can't you read the instructions?" she asked loudly, drawing attention from nearby patrons. The room fell silent for a brief second before whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Marcus froze, his face burning with embarrassment, as tears threatened to spill over. For a moment, time seemed to slow down. All Marcus could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat and the weight of everyone's stares pressing down on him. He tried to blink away the tears, determined not to let them fall. Clutching the edges of the counter for support, he silently vowed to get through this ordeal no matter what. Little did he know, this encounter would set off a chain of events that would change not only his life, but also the lives of those around him. As Marcus stood there, frozen and humiliated, Linda's sharp words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Her voice carried across the otherwise quiet bank lobby, drawing curious glances from everyone nearby. Some patrons exchanged knowing looks, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to intervene or remain silent. For Marcus, each second felt like an eternity. His hands trembled as he tried to steady himself, his small frame shrinking under the weight of her harsh tone. Linda wasn't done yet. With an exaggerated sigh that echoed through the room, she leaned back in her chair, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "This isn't a daycare center," she said loudly, her voice dripping with disdain. If you can't handle basic tasks, maybe you should wait until you're older before coming here." The comment stung worse than anything Marcus had ever experienced. It wasn't just the words themselves. It was the way she said them, as though he were invisible, unworthy of even a shred of kindness or understanding. Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes, but he blinked hard, refusing to let them fall. He didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing him cry. Instead, he forced himself to focus on the check lying on the counter between them, its edges slightly crumpled from his nervous grip. Deep down, he knew this should have been a simple task, a routine errand his mother had entrusted him with, but now it felt like an impossible mountain to climb. The whispers around him grew louder, though they were muffled by the rush of blood pounding in his ears. One man seated nearby shook his head disapprovingly at Linda's behavior, while a young woman tapped furiously on her phone, perhaps documenting the scene. But most people simply looked away, unwilling to get involved. To them, Marcus was just another kid caught in an awkward moment. They couldn't see the storm raging inside him, the mix of shame, anger, and helplessness threatening to overwhelm him. Finally, after what felt like forever, Marcus managed to choke out a response. "I'm sorry," he muttered softly, his voice barely audible above the low murmur of the crowd. He quickly grabbed the check off the counter and stepped back, desperate to escape the spotlight. Without waiting for further instructions or permission, he turned and hurried toward the exit, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. Once outside, Marcus paused beneath the shade of a nearby tree, taking deep breaths to calm himself. The fresh air helped clear his mind, but the sting of Linda's words lingered. He replayed the incident over and over in his head, wondering what he could have done differently. Was it really his fault? Had he made some kind of mistake? No matter how hard he tried to rationalize it, one thing was certain. He never wanted to set foot in that bank again. Unbeknownst to Marcus, however, his ordeal was far from over. Back inside the bank, the murmurs continued to spread. Several customers approached other staff members to express their discomfort with how the situation had been handled. One elderly gentleman even asked to speak to a manager, insisting that Linda's behavior was unacceptable. Though no immediate action was taken, seeds of doubt about her professionalism began to take root among her colleagues. Meanwhile, Marcus trudged home, his heart heavy with disappointment. When he finally reached the front door, he hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain what had happened. How could he tell his mother, the person who always encouraged him to face challenges head-on, that he had failed so miserably? Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door and stepped inside, bracing himself for the conversation ahead. Little did Marcus know, his mother already had a plan forming in her mind. A plan that would not only address the injustice he faced, but also send a powerful message about respect, dignity, and accountability. When Marcus walked through the front door, his face still flushed with embarrassment, Evelyn immediately sensed that something was wrong. She was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing some documents for work, but she set them aside the moment she saw her son's slumped shoulders and downcast eyes. "Marcus," she called gently, her voice filled with concern. "What happened?" At first, Marcus hesitated. He didn't want to burden his mother with his problems, especially since he felt partly responsible for the situation. But as he looked into her warm, understanding eyes, the dam broke. The tears he had fought so hard to hold back earlier now spilled over, and he began recounting the events at the bank in a shaky voice. Evelyn listened intently, her expression shifting from worry to disbelief, then to quiet anger. Her hands clenched into fists under the table as Marcus described how Linda had spoken to him. Her dismissive tone, the public humiliation, the way she made him feel small and insignificant. By the time he finished speaking, Evelyn's jaw was tight, and her normally calm demeanor had been replaced by a steely resolve. For a moment, she said nothing, letting the weight of the story sink in. Then, placing a comforting hand on Marcus's shoulder, she spoke softly but firmly. "This isn't your fault, sweetheart," she assured him. "You did nothing wrong. That woman, she doesn't know who you are or what you're capable of. And frankly, it's not about you. It's about her lack of respect and professionalism." Marcus nodded, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. "But why would she treat me like that?" he asked quietly. "I just wanted to deposit Grandma's check." Evelyn sighed, her heart breaking for her son. She knew all too well how cruel people could be when they judged others based on appearances or assumptions. But this wasn't just any ordinary incident. It had happened at a place she now owned. The irony wasn't lost on her, and it fueled her determination to make things right. Later that evening, after tucking Marcus into bed and ensuring he felt safe and loved, Evelyn retreated to her home office. Sitting at her desk, she opened her laptop and pulled up the files related to the bank's operations. As she reviewed the security footage system, her mind raced with possibilities. She needed to act carefully, not out of revenge, but to ensure that no child, no customer, would ever be treated this way again. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she drafted an email to the corporate office. In it, she detailed the incident, attaching time-stamped video clips captured by the branch's surveillance cameras. The footage clearly showed Linda rolling her eyes, raising her voice, and embarrassing Marcus in front of other patrons. Evelyn signed the email anonymously, knowing that revealing her identity too soon might undermine the integrity of the investigation. As she hit send, a sense of satisfaction washed over her, but it was short-lived. This was only the beginning. Evelyn understood that real change required more than just calling out bad behavior. It demanded accountability and education. She envisioned workshops, training sessions, and policies designed to foster empathy and inclusivity among the staff. But before any of that could happen, justice had to be served. The next morning, Evelyn woke up early, unable to shake the image of Marcus's tear-streaked face from her mind. Over breakfast, she reassured him once again that everything would be okay. "Sometimes people need to see things from a different perspective before they change," she explained. "And that's exactly what we're going to help them do." Though Marcus still seemed uncertain, there was a flicker of hope in his eyes. For the first time since returning home, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, something good could come out of this painful experience. Meanwhile, Evelyn prepared for the next steps, determined to turn this unfortunate incident into an opportunity for growth, not just for Marcus, but for everyone involved. Little did Marcus, or Linda, know, the wheels of justice were already in motion. What started as a humiliating encounter at the bank was about to become a lesson in humility, respect, and the power of standing up for what is right. The anonymous email landed in the corporate office's inbox early Monday morning, catching the attention of Sarah Collins, the bank's head of compliance. Sarah was known for her meticulous nature and commitment to maintaining the institution's reputation. When she opened the email and reviewed the attached footage, her eyebrows shot up in surprise. The video showed Linda Harper berating a young boy in front of other customers, her tone sharp, her body language dismissive, and her words cutting. Sarah immediately forwarded the email to senior management, including the vice president of operations, who wasted no time calling an emergency meeting. Within hours, a team was assembled to investigate the incident thoroughly. They reviewed the footage multiple times, noting every detail: the boy's nervous demeanor, Linda's audible sighs, and the visible discomfort of nearby patrons. It didn't take long for them to agree that this behavior was unacceptable, especially from someone representing their institution. Linda, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing behind the scenes. She went about her day as usual, handling transactions with the same brisk efficiency, but occasionally glancing over her shoulder. Something felt off. The atmosphere at the branch seemed tense, and several coworkers avoided making eye contact with her. At first, she brushed it off, attributing it to the usual workplace drama. But deep down, a nagging sense of unease began to creep in. A few days later, Linda was summoned to a meeting with her immediate supervisor. "We've received a complaint about your conduct," he said bluntly, sliding a printed copy of the security footage across the table. Linda's face paled as she watched herself on the screen, her harsh words echoing back at her. Her stomach churned as she realized the gravity of the situation. "This is being taken very seriously," her supervisor added. "Corporate has launched an investigation, and we need you to cooperate fully." Linda tried to defend herself, insisting she had simply been doing her job and that the boy seemed unprepared. But her arguments fell flat, even to her own ears. She left the meeting feeling exposed and vulnerable, her confidence shaken. For the first time in years, she questioned whether her approach to customer service had been too rigid, or worse, unnecessarily cruel. While the investigation continued, the corporate team decided to address the broader issue of staff behavior. They announced mandatory training sessions for all employees, focusing on empathy, inclusivity, and conflict resolution. Flyers were posted throughout the branches, emphasizing the importance of treating every customer with dignity and respect. During the sessions, trainers used anonymized case studies to illustrate poor interactions, including excerpts from the very footage that had sparked the investigation. Though Linda's name wasn't mentioned explicitly, many staffers suspected the examples were based on her actions. Back at home, Marcus struggled to shake off the memory of the incident. Despite his mother's reassurances, he couldn't help but wonder if anything would actually change. One evening, while helping him with homework, Evelyn noticed the doubt lingering in his expression. "Do you trust me?" she asked suddenly, setting down her pen. Marcus looked up, surprised by the question. "Of course I do," he replied without hesitation. "Then believe me when I say this isn't the end," Evelyn said firmly. "People sometimes don't realize they're wrong until they're shown clearly, and that's exactly what's happening right now." Her words brought a small measure of comfort to Marcus, though he still harbored some skepticism. He wanted to believe his mother, but part of him worried that the world wouldn't care enough to act. What neither Marcus nor Linda knew was that the investigation was nearing its conclusion, and the results would have far-reaching consequences. Evelyn, watching from the sidelines, felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that the process was working as intended. This wasn't just about punishing bad behavior, it was about creating a culture where kindness and respect were non-negotiable. And soon, everyone involved would understand the true weight of their actions. As the days passed, whispers spread among the staff about upcoming changes at the bank. Some employees grumbled about the additional training, while others welcomed the opportunity to reflect on their practices. But one thing was certain: the ripple effects of that single encounter between Marcus and Linda were growing stronger with each passing day. The day of the big announcement arrived, and the air inside the bank branch was thick with anticipation. Employees milled about nervously, exchanging hushed conversations as they waited for their regional manager to step into the room. Linda Harper sat near the back, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, trying to appear calm, but failing miserably. Ever since the investigation began, she'd felt like a spotlight had been trained on her every move. Her coworkers avoided eye contact, and even her supervisor seemed distant. The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on her shoulders. When Evelyn Williams walked into the room alongside the regional manager and two senior executives, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Most employees didn't recognize her at first. She carried herself with quiet authority, dressed in a tailored suit that commanded respect. But when the regional manager introduced her as Dr. Evelyn Williams, our new owner, jaws dropped. Whispers erupted around the room. Linda's face turned pale as she processed the news. Owner? She hadn't seen this coming. Evelyn stepped forward, her presence commanding yet warm. She greeted the staff with a polite smile before addressing them directly. "Thank you all for taking the time to meet with me today," she began, her voice steady and clear. "As many of you know, I recently acquired ownership of this institution because I believe in its potential to serve our communities with excellence. However, recent events have reminded me, and should remind us all, that we can always do better." Her gaze swept across the room, lingering briefly on Linda, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Evelyn continued, A few weeks ago, an incident occurred here that deeply troubled me. A young customer, a child, was humiliated by one of our staff members. This is not the kind of environment we want to foster. Respect, empathy, and professionalism must be at the core of everything we do. As she spoke, Evelyn clicked a button on a remote control, projecting security footage onto a large screen behind her. The video showed Marcus standing nervously at the counter, fumbling with his check, while Linda rolled her eyes and snapped at him. Gasps filled the room as employees watched the interaction unfold. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others exchanged horrified glances. For Linda, it felt like the ground beneath her feet was crumbling. Every word she'd said, every dismissive gesture, played out in high definition for everyone to see. This isn't just about one individual, Evelyn emphasized, pausing to let her words sink in. It's about ensuring that no customer, regardless of age, background, or appearance, is ever made to feel unwelcome in our branches. That's why we're implementing new training programs and revising our policies to prioritize inclusivity and compassion. She then revealed the identity of the boy in the video. "That young man is my son, Marcus," she stated simply, her tone softening slightly. "And while I'm proud of how he handled himself during this difficult moment, no child or adult should have to endure such treatment. As leaders in this community, it's our responsibility to set a higher standard." The room fell silent, the weight of Evelyn's words hanging in the air. Linda slumped in her chair, her face burning with shame. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she realized the full extent of her mistake. Not only had she disrespected a child, but she had done so in front of his mother, the very person now leading the organization. For the rest of the staff, the revelation sparked a mix of emotions: guilt, determination, and a renewed sense of purpose. Many vowed silently to approach their work with greater care and empathy moving forward. Evelyn concluded her speech by thanking the team for their cooperation and urging them to embrace the changes ahead. "Together," she said with a hopeful smile, "we can build a workplace and a world where everyone feels valued." As the meeting ended and employees filed out of the room, Linda lingered behind, unable to face anyone. Evelyn noticed her hesitation and approached her gently. "I hope this experience serves as a lesson," Evelyn said softly, her voice firm but kind. "Change starts with acknowledging where we've gone wrong. I trust you'll use this opportunity to grow." Linda nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Though the road ahead would be challenging, the seeds of transformation had been planted, not just within her, but throughout the entire organization. A year had passed since the incident that changed everything, and the bank was almost unrecognizable from the cold, impersonal institution it once was. What Evelyn Williams had envisioned, a place where kindness, respect, and professionalism reigned supreme, had become a reality. Customers entered the branch not with trepidation but with smiles, knowing they would be treated like valued members of a community rather than mere account numbers. Employees greeted each other warmly, their camaraderie evident in every interaction. The transformation wasn't just surface level, it was deeply ingrained in the culture of the organization. For Marcus, the past year had been transformative in its own way. The shy, hesitant boy who had walked into the bank clutching his grandmother's check had grown into a confident young man who carried himself with quiet pride. His newfound love for writing flourished as he continued contributing to the school newspaper, tackling topics ranging from bullying to resilience to the importance of standing up for what's right. His articles resonated with readers, earning him accolades and inspiring his peers to think more deeply about their actions and attitudes. Evelyn often found herself reflecting on how far they had all come. She knew the journey hadn't been easy, for Marcus, for Linda, or for the entire staff. But she also recognized that adversity had brought out the best in everyone. One evening, as she sat at her desk reviewing reports, she came across a letter addressed to her. It was from a single mother who had recently visited one of the branches. The woman wrote about how the staff had gone above and beyond to help her set up an account despite her limited resources. "Your team made me feel seen and respected. The letter read, "Thank you for creating a space where people like me don't feel invisible." Evelyn smiled softly, tucking the letter into a folder labeled Moments That Matter. These stories were reminders of why she had taken ownership of the bank in the first place, not for profit or prestige, but to make a difference in people's lives. Her decision to remain humble about her role as owner had paid off. Employees and customers alike respected her leadership because it stemmed from authenticity and integrity. Meanwhile, Linda Harper had fully embraced her second chance. No longer burdened by bitterness, she approached her work with genuine enthusiasm. She took particular pride in mentoring junior staff members, sharing lessons learned from her own mistakes. "Don't wait for someone to call you out before you realize you're wrong," she often advised them. "Be the person who notices when something needs to change, and then do it." Her words carried weight because they came from experience, and younger employees looked up to her as a role model. The changes extended beyond individual growth. The bank launched several community outreach programs aimed at financial literacy, offering free workshops to schools and underserved neighborhoods. Evelyn spearheaded these initiatives, believing that education was key to empowering people to take control of their futures. Marcus even volunteered at some of the events, helping younger kids understand basic concepts like saving and budgeting. Watching him interact with children reminded Evelyn of how far he'd come since that fateful day at the bank. One crisp spring morning, Evelyn organized a special event at the branch where Marcus had been humiliated. Dubbed a celebration of change, it brought together employees, customers, and local leaders to acknowledge the progress made over the past year. During the ceremony, Evelyn stood before the crowd and shared her vision for the future. "This isn't the end of our journey, it's just the beginning," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "We've shown that accountability and empathy can transform not just workplaces but lives. Let's keep building on this foundation." As the event concluded, Marcus stood beside his mother, watching as attendees mingled and laughed. For the first time, he felt no trace of resentment toward the bank or Linda. Instead, he felt gratitude for the lessons he'd learned, for the strength he'd gained, and for the opportunity to see positive change unfold firsthand. In the months and years that followed, the legacy of that difficult encounter continued to grow. The bank became known not only for its financial services, but also for its commitment to fostering inclusivity and compassion. And while Marcus and Evelyn moved forward with new dreams and aspirations, they never forgot the pivotal moment that had sparked such profound transformation. Sometimes, the hardest lessons lead to the greatest opportunities, and for everyone involved. This story was proof of just that. Months after the incident, the bank had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. What started as a wake-up call for Linda and her colleagues evolved into a ripple effect of positive change that touched every corner of the organization. The mandatory training sessions weren't just box-checking exercises. They became opportunities for growth, sparking honest conversations about how small actions could make a big difference. Employees who once viewed their jobs as routine transactions now approached each interaction with purpose, striving to leave customers feeling valued and respected. Linda's journey was perhaps the most remarkable. Though she still carried the weight of her past mistakes, she worked tirelessly to rebuild trust, not just with her supervisors, but also with the community she served. Her demotion turned out to be a blessing in disguise. It gave her a fresh perspective on the importance of empathy in customer service. She began mentoring newer staff members, sharing stories from her own experience to emphasize the impact of kindness. "You never know what someone is going through," she would say during these sessions. "A little patience can go a long way." Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Customers who had previously dreaded interacting with her now complimented her warmth and attentiveness. One elderly patron even wrote a letter to corporate headquarters praising Linda for her dedication and improvement. Slowly but surely, she earned back some of the respect she had lost, proving that redemption was possible when paired with genuine effort. For Marcus, life moved forward in exciting new directions. Winning the essay competition had given him a confidence boost he hadn't expected. Teachers encouraged him to join the school newspaper, where he discovered a passion for storytelling. His articles often highlighted themes of resilience and compassion, inspired by his own experiences. He also became more outspoken at home and in class, unafraid to voice his opinions or stand up for others. Evelyn watched her son blossom into a thoughtful, courageous young man, proud of the lessons he had learned and taught through adversity. The bank itself underwent significant changes under Evelyn's leadership. New policies were implemented to ensure accountability and inclusivity, including anonymous feedback systems that allowed customers to share concerns without fear of retaliation. Posters featuring quotes about respect lined the walls, serving as daily reminders of the values the institution stood for. Workshops continued regularly, fostering an environment where employees felt empowered to grow both personally and professionally. But perhaps the most impactful change was the introduction of a mentorship program connecting senior staff members with younger employees. This initiative not only improved teamwork but also created a culture of support and collaboration. Employees like Linda found renewed purpose in guiding newcomers, while junior staff gained valuable insights from seasoned professionals. The entire workplace dynamic shifted, from one of hierarchy and distance to one of unity and shared goals. Even outside the bank, the effects of Evelyn's vision began to spread. News of the reforms reached local media outlets, which praised the institution for its commitment to creating a more inclusive environment. Community leaders commended Evelyn for using her influence to drive meaningful change, inspiring other businesses to follow suit. Parents in the neighborhood started bringing their children to the bank, confident they'd be treated with care and respect. A stark contrast to the cold professionalism many had encountered before. One crisp autumn afternoon, Evelyn decided to visit the branch where Marcus had been humiliated months earlier. As she walked through the doors, she noticed subtle yet profound differences. Smiles greeted her from every direction, and the energy in the room felt lighter, warmer. When Linda spotted Evelyn, she approached hesitantly but with sincerity. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for your guidance." Evelyn smiled warmly, placing a hand on Linda's shoulder. "You did the hard work yourself," she replied. "I'm just glad we're building something better together." As Evelyn left the branch that day, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. The road hadn't been easy, for Marcus, for Linda, or for anyone involved, but the outcome proved that challenges could lead to growth. And though there was always room for improvement, the foundation had been laid for lasting change. Little did Evelyn know, this transformation was far from over. The seeds she had planted were taking root in ways she hadn't imagined, setting the stage for even greater possibilities in the future. In the days following Evelyn's visit to the bank branch, life for Linda Harper became a whirlwind of self-reflection and accountability. The demotion announced during the meeting wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was a wake-up call that forced her to confront not only her actions, but also the attitudes she had carried throughout her career. Stripped of her senior responsibilities, Linda was reassigned to assist customers under strict supervision, a role far removed from the authority she once wielded behind the counter. At first, Linda struggled with bitterness. She resented the public humiliation of being called out in front of her colleagues and dreaded facing Marcus or his mother again. But as weeks passed, something unexpected began to happen. The new training sessions started to sink in. Designed by corporate leaders in collaboration with consultants specializing in workplace empathy, these workshops pushed employees to think critically about how their words and actions impacted others. Role-playing exercises, group discussions, and real-life case studies challenged staff members to step into the shoes of both customers and coworkers. For Linda, one particular exercise stood out. Participants were asked to imagine themselves as children entering a bank for the very first time, nervous, unsure, and eager to prove themselves capable. When it was her turn to share thoughts, Linda hesitated before admitting aloud, "I never thought about what it might feel like to be that kid, scared and just wanting to do things right." Her voice cracked slightly as she spoke, drawing sympathetic nods from some of her peers. It was the first time she openly acknowledged the harm her behavior could cause. Slowly but surely, Linda began to change. Under the watchful eye of her supervisor, she practiced patience with customers who needed extra guidance. She learned to listen more attentively, smile genuinely, and offer assistance without judgment. At first, her efforts felt mechanical, almost forced, but over time they became second nature. Colleagues noticed the shift too. While some remained skeptical, others commended her willingness to improve. Meanwhile, Marcus found himself growing stronger in ways he hadn't anticipated. Encouraged by his mother, he decided to write an essay for school about the importance of kindness. Titled "A Lesson I'll Never Forget," the piece recounted his experience at the bank, not focusing on the humiliation, but rather on the lessons he'd taken away. He wrote about resilience, forgiveness, and the power of standing up for oneself. To his surprise, the essay won first place in a district-wide competition, earning him praise from teachers and classmates alike. When Marcus brought home the certificate and trophy, Evelyn beamed with pride. "You've turned something painful into something beautiful," she told him, pulling him into a tight hug. For the first time since the incident, Marcus felt truly proud of himself. Writing the essay had helped him process his emotions and reclaim a sense of agency over his story. Back at the bank, signs of progress were visible everywhere. Posters featuring motivational quotes about respect adorned the walls, and employees participated enthusiastically in team-building activities aimed at fostering camaraderie. Customers, too, noticed the difference. Smiles greeted them at every counter, and interactions felt warmer and more personal. The culture Evelyn envisioned was slowly taking root. One afternoon, as Linda assisted an elderly woman struggling to fill out a form, she caught sight of Marcus walking into the branch with his mother. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze momentarily, unsure of what to say or do. But then Evelyn approached her, giving her a small, encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Linda stepped forward and addressed Marcus directly. "Hi there," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to say, I'm really sorry for how I treated you last time. You didn't deserve that." Marcus looked up at her, surprised but thoughtful. After a pause, he nodded and replied, "Thank you for saying that. I forgive you." The moment was brief but powerful, a quiet acknowledgement of growth and redemption. As Evelyn watched the exchange, she felt a surge of hope. Real change wasn't instantaneous. It required effort, humility, and time. But seeing Linda take responsibility and Marcus extend forgiveness proved that even the hardest lessons could lead to meaningful transformation. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of a larger journey, one that would continue to shape not just the bank, but the lives of everyone involved.